Hey guys, welcome to the channel. It's Jack with Stronghold Strength and Conditioning. And today we're going to be talking about what it means to have a healthy metabolism. But before we get into it, make sure you take a moment and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future content like this. Every Thursday, I'm putting out videos showing you how to resolve aches and pains, prevent injuries, and overall optimize your performance inside the gym and outside of it in your daily life and routine. And it doesn't get much better than that. So take advantage of it. Ready? Let's go ahead and dive into this one. All right, guys, the topic of the day, what it means to have a healthy metabolism. Before we dive into all of that, what I first want to ask you guys is this simple question. What does health mean to you? So if you were to define health, how would you do that? Go ahead, take a second and think about it. Most people, when you ask them to define health, are going to say they want to be able to run a certain amount or lift a certain amount. Maybe they want good, healthy hair, skin, and nails. Maybe they want to be able to go to the bathroom regularly and not too frequently. These are all things that equate to our overall. And it's important that we understand that that bigger picture is what we need to really keep in mind here overall, is our health is dictated overall by our metabolism here. And today I'm going to be using Dr. Broda Barnes' definition of health for our talk and our conversation here. And that is, I'm going to read it because it's pretty long here. Warm body, good digestion, and daily bowel movements, healthy skin, hair, strong nails, bones, and teeth, the ability to procreate and desire sex void of PMS and hormonal issues, a healthy heart, clear mind, infrequent urination, deep restful sleep, good energy all day long, lean muscular body, lack of disease, and feeling content and happiness. So as you can see, that is an all-encompassing definition of what our health should be. And I really like that approach because it's going to play into what we're really talking about today quite a bit. Now, based on that definition, the next question I have for you guys is, are you healthy? Do you have, regular, frequent bowel movements that are healthy looking? Are you a good temperature? Do you have a good pulse rate? Is your heart healthy? Do you have healthy hair, skin, nails, bones, teeth? Are all those things checking out? Because if we're not looking at the systems as a whole, then we're missing something when we talk about the common denominator of them all, which is our metabolism. So that's what I want you guys to realize here. When we put all those together, if that's our definition of health, it's the fact that the metabolic processes that are occurring behind all of those are the common denominator. The sum of all those processes that Dr. Broda Barnes puts in a big, nice paragraph definition there, that is our metabolism. Okay, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, because if we can learn to support our metabolism, and if we can learn to recognize signs of a low, sluggish, or hindered metabolism, then we can actually do something about it. That's the important part. So, without further ado, let's start to talk about the pieces and parts that need to come together here and how we can assess whether we're functioning in the way that we should metabolically and if that's going to support those systems or not. So first off, again, let's get a good definition of metabolism, which is the sum of every process in our bodies. So that includes immunity, digestion, detoxification, sex drive, repair. All those things are dependent upon the metabolism, our metabolic processes in our bodies. Now, our metabolism runs off of macronutrients such as carbohydrates, fats, proteins. So we need those macronutrients, but it also is dependent upon micronutrients such as magnesium, iodine, selenium, just to name a few. Those are both controlling the overall extent of our metabolic processes in our bodies. Now, if we have a higher metabolism, that's going to mean that we actually require more food to effectively maintain and run that higher metabolism, which is what we want. We want to eat more to maintain and keep that metabolic process running at a high level. If we have a slower metabolism, that means that we have suffering processes, and this is why we're going to be looking at those processes a little bit closer here in a little bit, and less food is needed or used to actually maintain that metabolic system that we're having right now. So that is important to understand. High metabolic processes mean that we require more food, and that is okay. It doesn't mean that just because we require more food that it changes our weight and our body composition per se. Now, that's an important part because we put that in our definition as well. If the metabolism's working well, even though we require more food, we're effectively using that food to, again, feed into those other systems and processes. Whereas if we have a slower metabolism, we're not effectively processing the food content, less is used or needed, which means we have to decrease our caloric intake overall to maintain a body weight or composition. That's problematic, and other systems are not working. So keep that big picture in mind as we continue onward here. But before we get into talking about thyroid here, let's look at some very clear signs that we know can be markers of our health of our metabolism. So signs of a high metabolic rate here are a body temperature between 97.8 and 98.6 degrees. So we start at about 97.8 upon waking and gradually increase that temperature to midday at about 98.6 degrees. It's important to understand that when we are metabolically productive, we're producing heat, which is energy output there, carbon dioxide, and water. Those are the byproducts of metabolism. And if we're not producing that heat, the low body temperature can actually be a sign of a sluggish or slow metabolism right there. Next one, pulse rate, 75 to 90 beats per minute. Now, it's important to understand that just because you have a lower heart rate, this might indicate that you're fit, but fit does not equate to healthy necessarily. There are a lot of fit people out there that are struggling with sex drive, that are struggling with hair, nails, teeth, bone structure, that kind of things. So we got to look at the bigger picture here. Fit does not equate to healthy, and just because you have a lower heart rate, pulse rate, that is a sign that your body has adapted to the chronically stressed state that you've put it in, which is a lot of what our high level, especially endurance athletes, are experiencing. Their body is adapted for that high level of stress, but that does not equate to that they are healthy per se. There could be other things going on here. Doesn't mean that they're completely unhealthy either. So this is where the big picture matters. We need to look at all these things together, not as individuals. So the pulse rate, warm hands, feet, and nose all day long. If you have cold nose, cold hands, cold feet all the time, this is actually a sign of increased stress hormones in your body, specifically adrenaline and cortisol, which it's important to note that our stress hormones, those increased stress hormones, are direct antagonists to our thyroid, which, like I said, we're going to get into a little bit more of our thyroid here in a moment because it is a key factor in our overall metabolic processes. 1 to 3 bowel movements per day. So we have at least 1, 2, 3 that look healthy. They're not pebbles, they're not watery, they're not extremely nasty smelling. Those are all important things. 4 to 5 times a day we're urinating, not over 5 to 10 to 12. We have 4 to 5 times that we're urinating. It's not completely clear. It should be yellow to some extent, not completely brown either. So that's important that we have a good balance there. Healthy sex drive, no PMS symptoms, and we are fertile. That is a big one. So this is all stuff that is coming together to show that we have a good metabolism. Shiny hair, smooth skin, and healthy skin, strong nails, bones, teeth, we mentioned that one. 7 to 9 hours of deep sleep per night. Now that one, I'm willing to bet a lot of people are actually missing out on for various reasons, I'm sure, but this can actually point to a sluggish metabolism or a reliance on a lot of those stress hormones, specifically adrenaline and cortisol again, that wakes you up or keeps you awake at night. So that could be something too. And if you haven't already, you can watch my sleep video, which I'll link up above here, which talks a little bit more about that specifically. And happy, content, good energy all day. Those things are all things that are signs of a metabolism, and probably everybody's favorite that they've been waiting for. You should be able to maintain weight and body composition without dieting and exercise per se. Okay, so we shouldn't have to be doing a specific diet, temporary diets to get my body composition to a certain point or my weight to a certain point. It should naturally be maintained through the metabolic processes altogether. Okay, put all those together and that will say, do I have a healthy metabolism or is my metabolism sluggish? Go ahead. Go down that list, check off the ones that are struggling, and if you have multiples, then it might be a sign that you need some work with your metabolism and a little bit on that metabolic processes there. All right, so let's talk about thyroid now. It's important to understand that in order to have metabolism, period, we need to have a highly functioning thyroid, and we need to have the thyroid hormones. If our thyroid is sluggish, if we are not producing thyroid hormones in the way that our body should, our metabolism will be directly affected as well. So they are directly correlated to one another: slow metabolism, slow thyroid, or sluggish thyroid. And it's important to know that there is no such thing as metabolism without the thyroid hormones, period. Okay, so what are the thyroid hormones? So T1, T2, T3, and T4. The T stands for tyrosine. This is an amino acid or protein that our body uses to make up the hormones here of the thyroid. The number at the end of those is actually the iodine molecules that are bound to that. So that's important to understand that that's how those are made. Those are our hormones that are produced by the thyroid there. Now, the most active but less produced of these is T3, and this is the one that is directly involved in the cells to create and allow the metabolic processes to occur. Now, it's, again, note the little produced one. Okay, the more produced one is actually T4, which is primarily produced, and then it is converted in our liver and spleen and other areas to T3 from there. 80% gets converted, so it's less active, but it is converted into T3, which is our more active form of it. And then we also have calcitonin, which we should note is in charge of calcium regulation with parathyroid hormone in our bodies. So when we think of calcium, most of it is stored in our bones. There is some that is in our bloodstream and our soft tissues for the fact that we need it to actually help with muscular contraction. So that's very important to note, that if our thyroid is off, it can affect our bone health right there. And it can also affect our muscular ability to contract and activate those muscles. That's pretty big. So balance of calcitonin to PTH is something to really understand. So if our blood calcium is high, we release calcitonin to put the calcium back in the bones for storage for later use. If our blood calcium is low, our body releases parathyroid hormone, and it takes the calcium from our bones and releases some into the bloodstream for use of muscular contraction. Pretty important, because if we can't contract muscles, we can't move. Big problem there. Lastly, we should note that TSH, which is commonly measured when testing thyroid, is actually secreted from the pituitary gland. So even though it is used as a marker of thyroid health, which we'll talk a little bit about, it's actually a pituitary hormone. Seems kind of odd maybe that we would measure our thyroid health by a pituitary hormone, but the problem is we can't actually measure a true test of thyroid function because that would require measuring at the cellular level. So the next best thing is measuring blood levels of these thyroid hormones. So free, unbound T3 and T4, and that ratio of T3 and T4 to bound T3 and T4 can be better measures, but you would have to ask for those tests. Your doctor will likely only test TSH for your thyroid health, which can be a false marker if you drink caffeine. It can be if you're under high stress. So it can actually look like your TSH is in a normal range because it is inhibited by certain things, even though all the other symptoms that we talked about are there. So that is something to really keep in mind. You might be showing signs and symptoms of a sluggish, low metabolism, or AKA equals a sluggish thyroid, a slow thyroid, and you're not actually put in a state or labeled as hypothyroid because the TSH levels don't match up with what their chart says. So my next question for you guys is it just aging really and genetics, or are we doing things that are inhibiting the performance of our thyroid and directly affecting our metabolic processes and the overall health of our body and processes? Sure, some of it could be genetics, but I'm willing to bet that most of us are negatively impacting our thyroid and metabolism daily without even being aware of it in a lot of cases. So let's talk a little bit more about these factors in depth of the signs of a high metabolism and look at how that ties in with our thyroid a little bit more to give you a better picture. All right, so first off, let's talk about the one that most people are probably most interested in, weight gain. So first off, it's important to understand that, again, that T3 is needed for cellular metabolism to happen. So in order for our cells to create energy, we need T3. If we do not have a well-functioning thyroid or a slow metabolism because our T3 is not being produced enough or converted from T4, like I said, most of it gets converted from T4, this is where we see problematic weight gain. So we can't use that energy in the way that we normally would, and this causes us to gain weight and hold on to it and store that weight in the form of body fat. It's been shown that a drop in body temperature itself by 1 degree Celsius can actually lower the metabolism by 10 to 13%. So if that was a 2,000 calorie diet to maintain your body weight and you were eating 2,000 calories a day, that would be about 250 calories in there that your body would be not burning simply because of that temperature drop in your body. Again, remember, temperature drop is an indicator of a sluggish metabolism. A sluggish metabolism is directly linked to a sluggish thyroid. So that right there starts to cut our usage of calories by 250. If you're doing that 250 calories a day, that's going to add up pretty quickly overall. Now think of it in the reverse effect. So if you have a high running metabolism and a good body temperature, that is, remember, heat is a side effect of our metabolism, then we're going to be burning that 250 calories a day and naturally losing weight, or at least maintaining our weight better and a better composition in relation to that. It's also important to note that when people are doing a lot of these weight loss diets where they do higher protein, low carbohydrates, higher fat, that they are actually using their body's stress hormones to eat their own body as fuel source and provide glucose for their body in that way, which is why those things are actually pretty much effective short term. There's no question about that. They are effective short term, but they can have long-term negative effects, and we'll talk about some of the other things coming up here in a second. So elevated cholesterol, let's talk about this for a second. So if you have elevated cholesterol levels, it's important to know that T3 and vitamin A are needed to convert your cholesterol into your steroid hormones overall. So if your body is not converting your cholesterol into steroid hormones, and these would be your testosterone, progesterone, this would be your cortisol, your adrenaline. All of those are hormones that your body uses cholesterol for to actually convert into. If it's not doing that, then we're going to see elevated cholesterol levels as a result. So we need T3, we need vitamin A. Again, it comes back on the thyroid as well as vitamin A to produce healthy cholesterol levels and use cholesterol in the way that it's supposed to be used to produce those hormones in our bodies. So feeding off of that, if you have low sex drive, you're infertile, or you have PMS, if your body has low thyroid, high cholesterol, and low sex hormones, you're not converting that thyroid, or the cholesterol I should say, using the thyroid into your hormones that you should have, and that is a good indicator right there. You might also have those elevated cholesterol levels. So if you have both of those, that's a good indicator that there is something going on in your body metabolically at the thyroid level even, that is inhibiting that conversion of cholesterol to sex hormones. Or if you're constantly under stress, your body is going to sacrifice those sex hormones and produce cortisol and adrenaline instead with the little T3 that it has available or the little vitamin A that it has available. So it's going to prioritize your survival over your ability to sexually reproduce. Then that is important to also know. So let's talk about sluggish liver here really quickly. If you have a sluggish liver, the liver is our main detox organ in our body. So there's a lot going on here. There's actually 500 different functions that the liver uses its own glycogen stores to perform. Now, again, remember, our liver is helping convert T4 to T3, our more active form of thyroid in our bodies, and it is sluggish because of its inability to use its own glycogen because we have low T3 and T4. This can be a vicious cycle in itself. Now, things that would actually cause this would be overabundance of toxins in our body. So, if we have high insulin levels that we need excreted, or bile that needs excreted and broken down, if we have ammonia, if we have estrogen in our bodies, if we use drugs of any kind, pharmaceutical or not, alcohol, these all create a sluggish liver and an immune response in our body, which is chronically being cycled until our liver can fully detox that system or eliminate those toxins. And if it cannot function because it's limited in that sense, that in itself will slow our thyroid and our metabolism overall. So we need a high functioning liver to have a high functioning metabolism at the same time. Next, let's talk about digestive issues. So if we have a low metabolism, this also is going to equate to low stomach acid. Basically, remember, if we require less food or use food less, that means that we're not going to need to break it down as much. So our body downregulates the hydrochloric acid in our stomach. Now, hydrochloric acid is important for proper protein breakdown, absorption of zinc, copper, iron, calcium, B12, and folate. Huge role right there in getting a lot of the minerals and vitamins that we need to actually absorb in our body. Now, it's also one of our body's first lines of defense for immunity. Let's talk a little bit more about that lowered immune function. So again, if we have low thyroid, low production of hydrochloric acid, that means we have less protection from bacteria, fungus, and other viruses. And if that's the case, we're already at a higher risk there. But chronically lowered thyroid also equals chronically elevated stress hormones. And this is a problem in itself, because when cortisol is chronically elevated, it actually is intended to break down other tissues in our bodies. One of those being the thymus, which produces T cells in our bodies, which protect us again from foreign bacteria and viruses in itself. So it's kind of multi-level there, what's going on with our immune system. If chronically elevated stress hormones are present in our body, this might be why you're seeing that you get sick a little bit more regularly. That could be a sign of, again, a sluggish metabolism. Next one, increased blood pressure. So if we have high stress, we need higher energy to actually handle that stress overall. So it's important to understand that the higher stress life that we live, we're actually going to require more nutrients in our body to support that higher stress level. Now, again, remember that our stress hormones are antagonists to our thyroid hormones. So anytime our stress hormones are elevated, this automatically is depleting and inhibiting the production of our thyroid hormones and the function of our thyroid and metabolism. So if that is chronically elevated, this is where we see a higher blood pressure due to those nutrient needs from our body. Our body is trying to shuttle those nutrient needs a little bit more into those tissues so that they are supported well. Higher blood pressure, higher stress, decreased thyroid activity. This is also somewhere that we see soft tissue calcification occur over time. So we can also, again, take it back to an imbalance of micronutrients such as magnesium and sodium and calcium. When we deplete our magnesium stores, we actually see the calcium go into the tissues more. If calcium keeps getting drawn from the bone, we see elevated PTH, and then we also see calcification of soft tissue. So that could be bone spurs, it could be a harder soft tissue in itself. We might see muscular contraction issues occurring, and of course this is on a more severe level, but these are things that could be occurring over time with chronic stress related to that increased blood pressure. So if those vessels are more calcified, we get a higher blood pressure because they're not as mobile or easily moved in that sense. This can also play into our mood overall. So if we continue to have that high stress, reduced thyroid, we're also seeing that less cholesterol conversion. Remember, again, if we can't convert cholesterol, we're having an overall reduction of the ability to create the hormones that we need overall. So specifically stress hormones. So this is where you might not be producing your sex hormones, but also we're going to see that those stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline won't be produced as well either. And if you're relying on cortisol and adrenaline to actually keep your body running because you're in a chronically stressed state, and that is how your body is breaking down tissues, then eventually it will lead to fatigue, depression, a feeling of blah. Again, if we're not eating enough of the nutrients we need and providing ourselves metabolically in that way, it's going to lead to an overall failure of the system. When we think of our thyroid as our main system, this is supporting our metabolism overall, and our adrenals as the backup generator, a lot of us are putting ourselves in a state where we're relying on the generator to do the work and produce the energy, which would be that cortisol and adrenaline. But eventually, when we can't even support enough energy to create or convert cholesterol into cortisol and adrenaline because we're eating too little or not eating the right amount of carbohydrates in our diet or the right carbohydrates in our diet, it will come to a halt. And this could be why you're seeing crashes during the day as well. All right, and the last one I want to tie into this is any sleep issues. So remember, again, low thyroid equates to low metabolism, equates to elevated stress hormones. If we have chronically elevated stress hormones and we're trying to fall asleep, this can actually keep us awake, or it could be the reason that we wake up in the middle of the night. Our body actually uses liver glycogen to help get us through the nighttime. Now, if we aren't able to convert that glycogen again because we don't have T3 enough production of that, or we're relying on more stress hormones, then that's also why we wake up at 2 to 4 a.m. range usually, after we've not had enough food in our system anymore, and our body has to dive into our soft tissue stores to actually create energy to get us through the night. So that in itself could be something that is waking you up at night. And again, I'll link that sleep video that I did down below, because it goes into this in more depth also, if you want to do a little bit more on if you have sleep issues. So I'll ask you guys one more time. Again, is it just aging and genetics, or are we doing things that are inhibiting our thyroid and not allowing us to produce the metabolically in the way that we really should be able to? Or are we relying on stress hormones more? Are we feeding ourselves that really primes the use of stress hormones versus using actual available glucose that it really sets our bodies up for failure? If you have multiple things off on the list that we went over today, then there's a good chance that your metabolism is running sluggish. This is something that you can fix if you nutritionally are providing for your body in the right way. It does take time, but it is something that we can supply our bodies with the right things, and our bodies will be able to heal from this nutritional deficit that we've put it in. If you guys like this video, make sure you let me know by clicking that big thumbs up down below. Take a moment to share this one with a friend that you feel may be struggling with some of these things as well, or you know may be struggling with things like this as well. It's important stuff that I think a lot of us miss because we're so focused on weight loss and fitness versus actual health, and that is the overall goal. So let's make sure that health is our overall goal. The fitness will come along with that if we do it the right way. So share it with a friend, you know that they need it. Last but not least, if you guys have not already, make sure you take a moment and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future content like this. Every Thursday I'm putting out videos showing you how to resolve aches and pains, prevent injuries, and overall optimize your performance inside the gym and outside of it in your daily life and routine, and it doesn't get much cooler than that. Welcome to the Stronghold Army. I'll catch you guys next week.